Earlier, we played President Trump's comments about arming teachers at CPAC. That's where the crowd told Trump that they value the Second Amendment more than tax cuts, so obviously it was a receptive audience. Now, the response, I should say, to Trump's call to arm teachers, well, definitely the dominant story late in the gun debate, but it is not the only headline. Here is senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman with the wrap-up to what can only be described as interesting a few days at CPAC.
Yeah, we got a lot to get through here, Rich. The reactions, though, and the calls for action from students has been the driving force behind the renewed gun debate since Parkland. So let's begin with students. And this was a student march in Parkland today, but they're not students from Stoneman Douglas High. These are hundreds of students from Deerfield Beach High School who walked out of class today and marched 14 miles to Stoneman Douglas to show support and to protest gun violence in schools. 14 miles. They marched further than a half marathon just to make a point. And that student activism appears to be paying off. It certainly got the attention of Florida's Republican Governor Rick Scott today. The NRA-backed governor calling for the state to raise the minimum age to buy any firearm to 21 years old. Scott also seeking to ban bump stocks, strengthen gun restrictions on the mentally ill, and he wants one officer in every school for every 1,000 students. Now, the first of those 3 points are the ones specifically limiting gun access. They're all opposed by the NRA and its leader, Wayne LaPierre. The group, by the way, not exactly taking the high ground since Parkland.
Many in legacy media love mass shootings. You guys love it. Now, I'm not saying that you love the tragedy, but I am saying that you love the ratings. Crying white mothers are ratings gold.
The NRA also supports arming teachers in schools because, let's face it, more guns is always the NRA's default position. Reaction to Trump's plan to arm teachers panned by gun violence experts, by educators, by teachers and their unions, by school safety advocates, and even by military combat veterans today. It's also being lambasted by editorial boards. The New York Post, the Rupert Murdoch-owned conservative-oriented New York Post, calling the plan Smith & Wesson today and referring to it as Don's half-cocked idea. The paper also called for assault rifles to be banned. And this from the editorial page, quote, getting most of America to embrace arming teachers would require as huge a cultural shift as getting the nation to repeal the Second Amendment and collect the 300 million plus firearms now in circulation. However much sense either move makes to some folks, it's not realistic for the near future. And again, that from the New York Post, and they are not alone. A new poll from CBS shows a majority, 50% of Americans oppose the idea of arming more teachers, though there is a split here. 44% support the plan. Same poll shows majority support for banning both AR-15s and bump stocks. By the way, no Republican in Congress or the White House has called for bans on AR-15s despite the numbers. And that is on top of the 2/3 who say they are supportive of stricter gun control and the 97% support for universal background checks. Rich?
You know, first, and I think, in fact, I'm sure I speak for both of us, to that NRA spokeswoman who said the legacy media like us, to hell with her. Honestly, it takes a lot, given the last year, to offend, but the idea that you, I, or anyone we know in this business celebrates the idea that more people are watching after a tragedy, and I'll speak for myself, I got kids. These are the worst stories to cover, period. And there's more personal connections than you may think. Beyond distasteful. She's a piece of garbage for what she said.
How many Newtown parents have we had sitting in this chair? How many parents of gun violence?
And how much do we dread those conversations?
And it's draining on us too when we have those. I mean, we're obviously not the story here, but it's exhausting and it's emotionally wasting when we go through it. I hate having to cover this. I absolutely hate it.
Now, to that, I will tell you the idea of arming teachers, and I think you spelled it out really well with what the Post said, and some of the most important stakeholders that know what they're talking about here, from the military vets to law enforcement to whatever else. But I'm surprised by some of the people who say to me, hey, if we can't get meaningful reform, if we can't take these assault weapons, you know, out of the hands of these folks here, if we can't do this, that, or the other thing, then why not? I'm surprised some of the people. And you showed the numbers, it's a slim majority.
50-45, yeah. I'm not surprised because I think parents are so scared right now and so flummoxed at a lack of progress that they feel like it would make their schools safer, that they're willing to consider just about any option. And at least on paper, the idea of arming teachers or custodians or whatever sounds like it might have some merit to the whole thing. But I keep coming back to that sheriff's deputy who was on the school grounds in Parkland. And forget about that I think there might be harm that's inflicted by arming teachers. And we've talked about those possibilities. You identify the wrong student, or you wind up getting in the middle of a different kind of dispute, or whatever the case may be. To me, that deputy shows that even a well-trained 30-year veteran of the force who's trained on how to handle a gun, find a situation like that, and charged with charging in a spot like that, that he would cower behind a column and not go inside, shows that even if you've got the most prepared, best people, as the president would say, it doesn't guarantee that it will work, that it'll be the deterrent that he's looking for, that it will be the salve that he thinks it will be, and that he can disparage this guy for not doing his job while not realizing that sort of punctures his argument that arming teachers is the way to go here. It's like the president is seeing what he wants to see on this.
I have a solution. Or if the president feels what we need are more guns in school, okay, I got a deal for you. Put your money where your mouth is. We have cut what will turn out to be well over $1 trillion in revenue over his new tax plan. We have decided to appropriate funding where we don't have the money for programs that he has no problem. So obviously deficits and debt aren't a concern. You think this is such a good idea? Then pay for it. Pay for it. Put the government money, don't ask the lunch lady or the sex ed teacher to start packing heat in class. Put a professional in there and pay for it. Don't pass the buck to the states. Don't have the poor school districts can't afford it, but the richer ones can. Put your money where your mouth is if you really believe this is the case. But we are in for an interesting next few weeks and months here. We got the March 24 March on Life, and between now and then and even beyond, this is an issue I think at least isn't going away.
And I would remind people, let's make these weapons of war a little harder to get. Maybe that might help too.
I think that is a very sane suggestion. All right, coming up next, we're going to go to an issue we've talked about in this program closer to home, and that is the problems with cashless tolling. People getting thousands of dollars in fines, cars getting impounded, registration suspended, people dumped off on the corner of the Bronx at 2 in the morning. We're going to tell you the stories and take a look behind the lens at the company who's running this system.